When it comes to indie games, it's hard to keep putting out consistently great games for nearly 2 decades, and that's one of the most impressive aspects of the Shantae series. It's made by WayForward and it started on the Game Boy Color in 2002, and has now released the 5th game in the series, Shantae and the 7 Sirens. I personally jumped on with Pirate's Curse not at launch, a little bit later, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself there. And then when it came out, I had an even better time playing Half-Genie Hero. I love this series because of how incredibly fun the platforming and exploration is. The vibrant and exciting world the games occur in, it's great and it's awesome to see how it changes between games, see how it stays the same as well. And the awesome characters really help make the games feel fun and alive. That's why I was so excited when the 7 Sirens was announced. Now that the full game has been released, did Shantae dance past my expectations? One great thing about 7 Sirens is that it doesn't rely much on the previous Shantae games to tell its story, so new players can jump right in with what they're told in-game. However, 7 Sirens still brings up references to the old games that are fun little nods for those who played them, and they bring back characters that obviously you can be introduced to in this game, but it's going to be a lot more meaningful for those who have played it before. But to get you caught up, here's a lightning round with the story throughout the 4 previous games. If you don't need it, or don't want to hear it, I guess, you can skip to this timestamp on screen now. In Shantae is the guardian genie of Scuttletown, which is in Sequinland, and she's a half-genie, the daughter of a genie mother and a human father. At some point, genies just disappeared for no real reason, and Shantae took up her mother's place as the guardian genie. A pirate, Risky Boots, steals an engine and is trying to find 4 elemental stones to turn it into a super weapon, but Shantae gets the stones and stops Risky. For her bravery, she's taken to the genie realm where all of the genies now reside, and while she's offered a life of, bliss there, she refuses because she doesn't want to leave her friends back home. Shantae goes home and things are all hunky-dory until cue Shantae Risky's Revenge, where Risky gets revenge. Risky wrecks the town to steal a lamp and Shantae gets fired. Don't worry, this happens a ton, it's not really a big deal. So Shantae goes out to find the 3 magic seals to release the lamp's magic. But Risky tricks Shantae and uses the lamp to steal her magic. Now Shantae has to fight a corrupt version of herself, made entirely out of the magic side. Shantae wins, obviously, but by beating her she becomes a human, and she gets rehired for her job. Now we go to Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, where instead of magical transformations, Shantae uses weapons, the Risky Boots weapons actually, because Risky recruits Shantae after revealing that her former mentor, the Pirate Master, is using dark magic to come back. The two team up, and it's revealed the dark magic is actually Shantae's magic, but it's been corrupted. The two defeat the Pirate Master, and Shantae becomes a half-genie again, and we get the traditional Professor X-Magneto relationship where they're friends, and they're, oh, old friend, and they're playing chess, even though one has murdered a ton of people. Granted, it's not as much of a friendship as it is, in the X-Men movies and in the comics, but it's more of a mutual understanding. But yeah, last game to cover is Shantae Half-Genie Hero. Risky is being evil, Shantae is fired, Shantae collects X amount of MacGuffins, you get the point by now. The big thing here is that Shantae talks with a messenger from the genie realm, has to destroy it at the end of the game, but it turns out it's actually fine. Risky didn't corrupt it, which is why Shantae needed to destroy it. Shantae is told her mother gave up her for her safety and to protect the world, and it's really sweet and nice, and then that's how we end up here. Pretty quick recap of 4 games, if I do say so myself. Now on to 7 Sirens, and it's got a really different and fun story this time around. Considering that this game basically just released, I'm not going to go too far in depth into the story, basically until the main mission starts. Things kick off with Shantae and her friends traveling to a tropical island, all expenses paid might I add, because Shantae is going to participate in the inaugural Half-Genie Festival. When Shantae arrives, she meets up with the 5 other Half-Genies who have arrived for the festival. Granted, one of these Half-Genies may look pretty familiar to fans of the series, but just don't worry about that for now. On the first night on the island, all the genies are going to do a practice for the big show, but all of them except for Shantae, that is, disappear into thin air right after the performance starts. From there, Shantae steps up, and she goes and tries to find the missing Half-Genies. She has to explore the underground city the island was built on. It's full of tons of crazy different areas and enemies, with the biggest threats being the 7 Sirens that control each of the certain areas and terrorize the land. And of course Risky Boots is down there planning something nefarious as well. It wouldn't be a Shantae game without that. That's about as far as I'll mention the story though, as I don't really want to spoil any of the major events that happen on their own, as it's a super fun thing to explore and find and experience. One thing I definitely will talk about though, is the writing, because by God, is it incredible. The Shantae series generally has some great writing, that's something you can always count on, but 7 Sirens just knocks it out of the park. Even if the story sounds a bit simple to you, the writing carries it and makes it feel really impactful and intense. This is especially due to the character writing, which is where the game, and the series really, shines the best. As even with only the brief introductions at the beginning, you get a good sense of each Half-Genie's character, and it makes you want to go save them, They're your friends. You can tell that you're going to be friends immediately after those early interactions. But again, with the writing, it helps make this game as lively and as fun as it is. All the different side characters throughout the towns will constantly have their dialogue change, and it reflects as you complete major events. Sometimes it actually corresponds to the events, other times it's just jokes and just lighthearted stuff, and it's all so great. Some of it is teaching the player how to do certain actions or where to go, some of it is just nice flavor, and a lot of it is actually pretty funny. Sirens really nails the comedy, and while the story has lots of funny moments, I think my favorites are just the brief interactions with random side characters. Whether it be the person in Armor Town who's obsessed with fans but misses out on obvious fan puns, the chieftain who does the great thumb removal dad joke, or the bathwater selling attendant that may be a reference to Belle Delphine, of all things. This game is packed to the brim with some high-quality humor. As I briefly mentioned earlier, the island you explore is built over top of a giant underground city, which makes me feel very conflicted when it comes to the environment in the game. On the one hand, it's super cool to have this huge labyrinth to explore while also having some area topside to juxtapose the different environments between the ancient and the present, the buried and the not buried, I guess. But this also severely limits the different styles and aesthetics of the area you can have in the game in total. There are 9 sections in the game, and only 3 of them are topside. Starting with those, it's another strange place I'm put in. The 3 cities, Arena Town, Armor Town, and Tree Town, are all really cool and unique in their own ways, and it's interesting to see how they vary so much despite being in relatively close proximity. It's the areas between all of them that feel really similar and samey, as they're either just long stretches of bridge or on this metal ground with a background showing the ocean or some forests, and it's not really that unique. But since these areas between the cities are relatively minuscule and not super offensive, I can forgive them pretty easily considering how the focus topside is mainly on the cities. The place where I have real trouble is in the underground areas. Throughout all 7 underground areas, the same metal borders and flooring are everywhere, and it makes things feel too similar and samey the entire way throughout. Generally, the color of the metal will change, but that isn't necessarily enough to make it stand out from one another, not in a meaningful way. There's one section that's supposed to be a sunken ship, and while the layout and music and change of enemies and certain parts of the build make it feel like that, it's still the same friggin' metal for the majority of it, and it's just annoying because some sections do change things up for the better, but there's always something throwing it off. It's never perfect. One area has this cool mossy and plant style, but it just ends up fading off into a mix of that and the metal, which makes it more lame and it doesn't feel as genuine because it's not the entire area, it's just certain parts of that one area. If the whole thing, if transition areas were mixed with it, then it would make more sense. The pipes that you travel through, you could have done something cool with this, where the outsides and the insides are like cracked or filled with roots. It's natural. Make it like friggin' Krakoa, where it's where the buildings are made out of the plants. Like, do something wild like that. There's also a sweet futuristic science area in part of it, which is really cool, except for the fact that the majority of it is underwater, so you don't get to run around. You just swim around it, and it's not, it takes away kind of the flavor and the new environments you think you would have. One thing that especially irks me in that area specifically is that you can see the super gorgeous neon coral ocean floor background, and it's like, I want to go out and explore there. It looks so much cooler. Granted, I know the reasoning of this is to make the whole map feel connected, and like it's one fluid area that could conceivably have worked together, but come on, it's a video game. You can go wild. This is a game where a Half-Genie dances to transform into different things. I don't think people are going to be mad about that. Have fun with it. Make the sunken ship be more decrepit and made out of some strange material. Let us actually go explore the science area. Make the plant area overgrown and super different from the other areas. Again, just look at Krakoa. And let me go outside into the ocean. It just looks so pretty. I feel like that I should iterate, though, that I don't think the underground city is terrible, despite my, my little mini rant we've been on. It feels underwhelming. I felt like there could have been a lot more done with it. I mean, you look at past Shantae games and they have tons of environments that are all wildly different, and just do something like that. I don't remember which game it's from. Maybe Half-Genie Hero, maybe Pirate's Curse. There was one where there was this giant, haunted ghost mansion. Like, do something fun with that. That was a great change of pace to do the traditional, dead area, quote unquote, But yeah, like the sunken ship could have been something cool like that, but then it just feels too similar because it's all the same layout. Maybe have the sunken ship have been something that got crashed into it and it expands a lot more. There's a lot more underwater areas that are also haunted. That would be a cool way to change things up. Also, I gotta say that the map in this game is really bad. I mean, it works fine with showing you where you are, and I like how the sections are each divided up by color, but it's infuriating for a Metroidvania game like this. In this game, there are tons of secrets within caves, dehydrated plants, statues that can arise, electric boxes, and nuggets. But there's never a change on the map. When you find them or when you get them, there should be. There's no reason I shouldn't be able to see all the caves I've passed, the plants I've brought back to life, the statues I've raised. This game shows save spots, warp points, dungeons, and that's it. And I don't get why the other parts aren't shown. It's pretty traditional. You know, in Metroid, you'll see the missile icon if you pass one or if you grab one. It's, you know, these are common things. I don't know why they're not there, or at least why you can't put pins on your map like you can do in most other games. Like, in Zelda games, you can put pins on your map everywhere. You know, it's a very simple thing to do, and these were pretty easy changes that I don't know why they weren't implemented. It's just annoying when you're at the end of the game and you're trying to go back to 100% it, and you just have to fully explore the entire map again because the map does not show you what you've already found. And it's like, oh, what if I'm not going to 100% the game? Most people are going to try to at least 100% the heart squids, because who doesn't want max life? But that's the same case. You don't even see the caves, even if it weren't, you know, even if it didn't show you the difference between completed and uncompleted caves. Just show me where the caves are so I don't have to explore the entire map again, or look up a video online, or, you know, strategy guides. Like, it could have been fixed and it should have been fixed. That was a lot of aggression though. But luckily, that's really the only thing about this game that I found myself that upset about. Really upset about in general. So yeah, because the rest of the time, I was having a blast. I may not have been the biggest fan of the style of the majority of the environments in Shantae, but the underground city managed to play in a very fun way. You move through different areas in a relatively planned way, not linear, but it's a similar path you're going to take each time because you're blocked off by different obstacles. And it helps escalate the new enemies and features you get in a well-balanced way. If this just sounds like a regular Metroidvania to you, you'd be correct, but Siren manages to have it be so much more fun with additional and optional features peppered throughout the early areas. Even through the end of the game, you'll still be getting new items or exploring new subsections in those very early on areas. This is especially due to the caves that are scattered around the map. I love the caves because they're fun little rooms that either have a small puzzle in them or need a certain ability to traverse and get to the heart squid that's waiting for you at the end. And they help you feel like you're constantly getting better at the game. It was the best feeling whenever I unlocked a new ability and I knew exactly where the cave was that had that ability needed for the solution of it. And finally being able to complete it after being teased for so long was just perfect. While these caves are fun, I think the labyrinths are some of the most fun Shantae dungeons with how unique each one is. They generally each have one or two strong gimmicks used throughout, but each labyrinth grows upon the previous abilities and transformations you've earned, and that you'll learn within. This is where the environments feel different as well, and better encapsulate the general tone of the surrounding section of the city. By spacing them out and only having important events involve and surround themselves, it also gives the labyrinths a strong air of importance. When you look at the gameplay throughout the Shantae series, with the exception of Pirate's Curse, it's always been focused on the magic and transformations Shantae can use to explore and solve puzzles. This is, of course, without mentioning her stunning hair. But Pirate's Curse switched things up by giving Shantae items that can be used rapidly and in conjunction with one another to keep up a fast pace, rather than the somewhat slow transformations from previous. Well, I bring this up because Sirens gets the best of both worlds and nearly perfects Shantae's gameplay. Of course, she has her hair whipping, as is usual, but her dancing has changed from transformations to 4 different spells. 2 of them cause serious damage, which is widespread as well. 1 reveals secrets, and the last one heals Shantae, but they're also used to interact with the world. As for Shantae's transformations, there are 5. 2 of them are really only situational, being used to drill through dirt and swim through water, respectively. However, the other 3 are a damaging dash that can grab walls as a newt, a charge attack that can speed down halls and break blocks, as well as be used as a body slam from the air as a turtle, and 2 additional jumps as an octopus, strangely enough. Clearly you can see what I'm getting at, in that these all can be used together to make Shantae's movement fast, fluid, and fun throughout the game. As someone who thoroughly enjoyed both the fast-paced pirate equipment and the slower transformations, this mix is an absolute blast that can be easily adapted to lean whichever way I want at any given time. After playing both Pirate's Curse and Half-Genie Hero, it feels like they just took the playstyles from both, mixed them together perfectly, and, that's what we got here. And while I do still wish there were regular transformations like the Harpy or the Spider, or even the dumb ones like the Pot, I get that they wouldn't have fit in great here. But her magic and her hair aren't the only things Shantae has going for her, as Shantae can buy spells and items to round out her arsenal, all of which can be upgraded to be insanely powerful. These do come at the cost of magic though, but with the right setup of monster cards and the refills you get naturally, you'll be fine. The different items are a fireball, which can be upgraded to a flamethrower, floating pike balls, which can be upgraded to floating swords, homing rockets, boomerangs, and a bubble that blocks damage, and that bubble can actually be made to become invincible, or invincibility for Shantae, but it sucks out the magic so fast, like, you only use that in very rare occasions. But mix all those in with Shantae's dances, her hair whipping, and her transformations, you have the recipe for one of the most fun platforming movesets in general. As you traverse the vast island, you'll encounter tons of enemies, obviously, as, there wouldn't be a game otherwise. 7 Sirens has a very strong variety of enemies, which is something you don't always notice when it happens in platformers, but you definitely do notice when it isn't implemented. When there's only like 5 or, not even 10 enemies sometimes, you realize that there's not that many enemies because you keep seeing them again, or you keep seeing like the slightest variation on them. In regards to the enemies themselves though, there's a fair amount of just cannon fodder as needed, but you gotta expect that. However, there are a lot of really good enemies like the crystal blobs who you have to beat by dancing to remove their protection, a skill which is taught to you earlier on in the game that you can dance to, make gems come to you, and hearts and magic as well. You can pull those things to you by the dancing. It's taught to you early in the game, and otherwise you can't hurt them, but you dance, you remove their protection, then you can easily kill them. The difficulty scaling with enemies is also insanely done better than it is in most games. As you get deeper into the underground, more enemies will appear. However, after their first appearance, they'll start showing up in other areas they previously hadn't been in, escalating the danger with the player's strength. And it works really well because it shows that, these enemies are a lot more widespread. It's not like, oh, you can only find this one enemy in the bottom left corner of the map. They'll start spreading out more and more. And it helps, feel like the enemies are moving around more. But also at certain times, you'll see way less enemies, not even just, less cannon fodder, but just less enemies in general because of certain, events happening in the game. I'm not going to spoil exactly what, but that helps boost the tension and make it feel like, oh, this is serious, If everybody else is gone and Shantae's still down here, that's when things are, not great. But there are also stronger versions of early game enemies that show up the deeper you go in, like the electric bats or the stupid spiders that can shoot 3 fireballs instead of just 1, and it's annoying because it messes you up because you're... Sorry, moving on. But the coolest enemy scaling is how there are 3 enemies that first show up in dungeons as mini-bosses. Early dungeons, mind you, like the first and second one. But in the deeper levels, you just have to fight them as regular enemies, sometimes multiple at a time, and I just love that. It's one of those things where it's such a cool detail, and they didn't have to do it. They could have just, had the enemies show up in only the deeper levels, or not had them show up again, but it's the fact that it's like, yeah, you beat them earlier, and that was a big challenge earlier, but now they're just here, they're in the world. When a game has a tangible feeling of improvement like that, instead of just saying, wow, look at how strong you've gotten, that's my bread and butter. We stand tangible improvement throughout the adventure. Now, for as much as I'm gushing about the enemies, I didn't feel the same complete adoration for the bosses. Don't get me wrong, I don't think they're awful, just a bit underwhelming. They have some cool concepts around them, like having to hit certain weak points in a specific order that you can either, guess and hopefully get right, or you use the dance to see them before you hit the boss, or having to keep the boss in a certain spot to be able to hit them, but the bosses just aren't up to snuff. Once you figure out the gimmick, the fight's basically over, as they don't really change from those first moments. I also found that it seems like they really don't have that much health. Like, I know they didn't want to make them giant, damage sponges and tanks, but it feels like, it's just they go down really fast. Maybe I just, had a strong loadout, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like that. And it really sucks because I love the different Siren designs as well. There's a lot of care put in them, and you get such personality from just their designs and the brief lead up to the fight. And it's like they're like the Darth Maul of this game. Looks cool, but nothing really happens with them here, and you kind of want more from them. I can't just ignore one of the coolest new features of the game though, and that's monster cards. When I first saw these, I expected to hate them, or at least just, not use them that much, but how wrong I was. Basically, each enemy has a card they can sometimes drop. There are 50 cards in all, and if you collect a certain amount of those cards, you can get a special effect. The number of cards required is different per enemy, with some being much more of a struggle to get than others. I'm looking at you, Scorp, Gal, and Spectre. But the effects are perfect, because on their own, they're pretty helpful, pretty good, but they're nothing overpowered. You're not going to be able to break the game just on their own. But you can equip 3 at a time, and that's where the fun begins. They can be broken down into different categories. Some will make things cause more damage, others will make them use less magic. Some boost movement speed when swimming or crawling, and there are tons of individual ones that make cheap prices in shops or automatically break pots when you run by them. They all have different uses, and depending on your playstyle, you'll use some infinitely more than the others. I plan on making a video on just how great monster cards are in the nearby future, so I'll talk about them there more, but I want to leave you with the strongest combination here. You get the Coral Siren for magic regeneration, you get Naga to reduce magic cost of the fireball, and you get Frog Lips to boost the fireball damage. Use those with fully upgraded flamethrower, and you can hold it continuously for 3 minutes and 59 seconds exactly. I timed. So, kind of annoyed it's not 4 minutes, but doing this gets constant 4 points of damage, hitting multiple times a second to enemies in a very wide range. And to say that's overpowered is a bit of an understatement. Now, the game is incredibly fun to play, but it is not at all hard to play. Not in the slightest. The only time I died was because I wasn't paying attention in the very beginning of the game and jumped into poisoned water without realizing it. As I mentioned earlier, you get tons of different ways to fight and attack, but because you have so many different ways, it's hard to lose. Ever. Add on to that the fact that just by killing enemies you come across, you'll always have close to max food to heal yourself, and it's not going to be a difficult journey. Especially if you're hunting down monster cards, you're going to have to kill the same enemies multiple times to get more and more, chances of getting the cards, and generally it ranges from like 3 to 5 cards being needed on average. So you keep killing them and you're not going to get a card every time, but it's more likely that you're going to get food than a card. And so by the end of the game, you're going to have fully maxed food no matter what. It's going to be hard not to do it. Even if you eat it regularly, you're still getting it on such a large rotation that I don't think there was ever a point when, after the first hour or two of the game, when I ever dip below like 5 or 6 on a certain food item, even the strongest food items. I'm not saying it's unfulfilling though, the journey overall, as I've already mentioned the great sense of progression the further you get into the game. It's just that it's a pretty easy experience overall. While I do enjoy and don't need my Shantae games to be controller breaking levels of hard, a step up in terms of general difficulty wouldn't have hurt overall. Even if there's some parts of this game that aren't perfect, the graphics and the art are as close to perfect as humans can get. I mean, the art is gorgeous everywhere, whether it be the large, detailed character portraits used during discussions, the in-game characters, and the fun and varied design each character has. Like, every single side character has their own identity. They could have just copy and pasted people if they wanted to, but they didn't. They put the effort in. You even see the effort with how people in Tree Town dress differently than people in Armor Town, and people in Armor Town dress differently than in Arena Town. Like, they didn't have to go that far, but they did, and I respect them for that. It's great, and the gorgeous areas as well. Yes, even though they could have been more varied, but what we still have is gorgeous. The incredible backgrounds I would love to explore. I found myself getting kind of lost in the backgrounds. Obviously, the coral neon sea that I mentioned still looks so cool. Please, WayForward, please release a DLC where you go explore that. But also just like the beaches and even inside the metal things, at certain parts it would be more run down and like there'd be cracks and small things with water leaking in. Like, that's the good attention to detail that I'm here for. Just add on to that the variety of incredibly crafted enemy designs, especially the unique designs of all the Sirens. And it's great. It's just so good looking overall. Do be warned though, while this game isn't NSFW or anything, you might not want to play it around your family for certain reasons. Because unless your family is really cool, and I'm talking really cool, it's going to make things feel a bit awkward. But for as good as the art is in the still character frames, it is exponentially better in the cutscenes. Yes, there are full cutscenes in 7 Sirens, and they are glorious. Granted, they're relatively short and are a bit few and far between, but that makes it much more special when you actually get to see them. Really, this just leaves me with a taste and makes me want a fully animated Shantae show or movie. Especially with the opening of the game being animated by Studio Trigger, one of the best anime studios who animated classics like Kill la Kill, Little Witch Academia, and Promare. Funny thing about Promare is that actually in the theater, they showed the Shantae opening before the movie. And, well, some people were a bit confused by it, seeing that on the big screen. But really, that's when I got hooked. I was like, heck yeah, I'm excited for Shantae. And that was actually, I believe that was before it was even Shantae and the Seven Sirens. I think that was when it was still Shantae 5, but I could be wrong. Don't try to fact check me on that one. I could go on and on for hours and hours about how good the game looks and how much care was put into it and how the enemies' unique designs, even from the same type in other video games like bats and spiders, they don't look as good there as they do here. But really, I don't think there's anything I can say that these graphics don't speak to for themselves. I mean, just, it looks so good. And I know the original 3 Shantae games had the really good pixel art look. I think the hand-drawn, animated look, personal preference there, but I think it's just so much better. It's superior because even, pixel art is really cool, but it's all so good here. I'm sorry. Maybe that's just, the fact that these games came out more recently, so, they've had more time to develop themselves, but God, it feels like I'm playing an animation, but like in a different way than how Cuphead was like a 30s. It's hard to describe, which I know I'm trying to review and describe it right here, so shouldn't I be better at that? But, shut up. Just ignore what I'm saying and just look at the beautiful graphics. I mean, come on. As you've seen, for most of the things in Seven Sirens, I've been either very for or very against them. But, when it comes to the game's soundtrack, I'm really just indifferent towards it. Like, it's not bad in the slightest, it's good, it's totally serviceable. But it's also not nearly as good as any of the other recent games in the series. Mainly I attribute that to Jake Kaufman not being the composer this time around, which just feels like a missed opportunity for WayForward, as he makes bangers on whatever he's working on. Granted, there's likely just a scheduling issue between the two, and that sucks. I really don't have much to say here, though, on the music. It's all just pretty passable to me. Nothing standing out a ton in a, really good or a really bad way. Well, except for the store in Armor Town, because for some reason, they made it sound exactly like regular suburban retail store music for really no reason. It doesn't fit in the time or even in the area. It isn't functionally different from any of the other stores in the game in look or use. But I guess they decided that it had to be a special theme for just this store, and it had to be a very stereotypical retail theme. You know what, WayForward? You do you. I've explained my thoughts on Shantae and the Seven Sirens and all its individual aspects, but when you put it all together, how does it work? Well, as a whole, I'd say it works spectacularly. Despite there being a few problems with the game, some slightly larger than others, there isn't actually anything outright awful or something that largely detracts from the game as a whole. Most of my complaints could be filed under the term nitpicks. Maybe slightly above that. I don't know if there's a term for between nitpick and major problem, just I guess brief criticism, but there's no problems that largely detract as a whole and make the experience worse. Do I wish the environments were more varied? Sure, but the ones that we got are fine. Would the game be more fun if it were slightly more difficult? Probably, but it's fun in a different way here. I can go on and on, but I can't think of any major flaws with the game. Just some small ones that hold the game back from being amazing, but don't stop it from being a really good time. If you're wondering about if you want to play this game, I say go for it. If you're a fan of the Shantae series that's on the fence about it, there's more of what you've come to love here from all the previous entries, and if you're on the fence about getting into Shantae as a series or Metroidvania games as a genre, I say this is the perfect game for you. It's easy enough to give you a good handle on the series and the genre, and will be an effective way to decide if you want to play more games like it, or if this style of game just isn't for you, which is okay. Not every game is for every person. All in all, when it comes to Shantae and the Seven Sirens, I have had a blast with it. It may not be the strongest entry in the series, but what it is some good old classic Shantae fun. You're getting a great game for the price tag of only $30, and if you're watching this in the future, it's probably going to have some large sales like the rest of the series does after a while. For as much fun as the base game is, I hope it gets the same support that Half-Genie Hero did, with multiple DLC packs of different costumes and adventures, because that would be a great way to keep me and other people coming on back again and again for more and more fun. But if you played it, what did you think of Shantae and the Seven Sirens? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know if you want me to talk about more Shantae as well. I'd love to. Maybe you want this game to be talked about more, or maybe the series. Let me know. Maybe other games. Leave it in the comments and I'll probably talk about it. Also, make sure to hit subscribe if you want to see my videos on Shantae when they do come out. I've got that one on the monster cards in the works, and that's going to be real fun. So, thank you for watching this fairly longer than normal review. Let me know if you want me to keep my reviews longer like this and more in depth, or shorter and more to the point. But yeah, thank you for watching, and goodbye.